Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jim Smalley. I'm the Product Manager for 2020 Fusion. And welcome to this afternoon's webinar on 2020 Fusion version 7. So what are we going to cover today? Well, as ever with any Fusion update, we try to cover a variety of areas that we look to focus on based upon some market demands and feedback that we get from our customers. But as everybody will know, from version 6, the main area of the product that we've worked on was our rendering capabilities. And version 6 saw the introduction of a new render engine, in which we added two render qualities called Presentation and Presentation Plus. Some of the feedback that we received is that some of our customers would like to work with an even higher quality render, so version 7 delivers that. In addition to that, we have other areas of development where we've looked at how our viewpoint management can be not only improved but also repurposed in various aspects of the product. I'll go into that area as well. In version 6, we introduced what we call our effects ribbon, where you can apply post-processing effects, and we introduced some functionality to be able to save and recall that in version 7. One of the more exciting features in 7 is the advances that we've made to the 360 Panorama Technology, which now not only allows you to generate a panorama for a single viewpoint, but also allows you to generate panoramas for multiple viewpoints within the same scene. Also, we've added support for a future update that's coming very soon in our Decorative Catalog, which is to contain lighting information. And then in the areas of design creation and user interface, user experience, these are typically the areas where we pick up on user feedback for enhancing very, very specific areas of the product. And we'll go into those in more detail as the presentation goes on. So let's get stuck in. So I thought it would be quicker and easier just to go straight into Fusion. I've cheated slightly in that I have already applied our new publish render. Just to talk a little bit about its location, still exists in the same rendering area that we have here. And previously, of course, we had 6 icons here. Now we have a 7th. So what we've done in terms of just the redesign of this section is that we've grouped everything together by their commonality. So we have the first column now for the existing wireframe and white fill render qualities. We then have a second column for the color fill and draft render qualities. And then the third column is for the render qualities that are all part of the new render engine. So Presentation and Presentation Plus are the same as you would have experienced in version 6. But here we have the new Publish render, which is available in version 7 onwards. Now the hallmark of the Publish render is that whereas Presentation and Presentation Plus, they had very hard shadows and very hard reflections. So in this particular scene here, the Presentation render, as you can see, those lines are very, very hard and defined in the reflection there and in the shadows that are cast there. In the Publish render, obviously, it takes longer to generate, but there are multiple passes which takes turn over the course of the render. It softens up the sense of shadow and the sense of reflection. So it's adding a greater sense of realism to the scene. This particular scene took about 5 minutes to render. As you know, we have our caching functionality, so the fact that we went from presentation to publish in an instant is because obviously I haven't changed any of the geometry or any of the styles or the features and options within this scene. And as such, just as it does between Presentation and Presentation Plus, as long as nothing significant changes in the design, then that image will be cached. So hopefully you'll see that this is a really solid improvement in the rendering engine. Just to give you a few other examples. I've got a little gallery of other ones that we've created, and those of you who follow our sort of Twitter and sort of LinkedIn feeds, you may well have seen a number of these as well. So these are all operating at a published render quality. So we have one scene here, another one here, and again, these things to focus on are the softness of the shadows and the reflections here. And another scene here, got some great wood grain on this, and of course we have the sun hitting here. You've got the softness of the shadows, and also the reflections in the French doors there. Another one here illustrating some great textures, but also here in Presentation and Presentation Plus, those lines would have been very, very hard, but now they are much softer. Another example, again in the backsplash here, the upstand, the reflection is very muted, which is nice, and obviously we're getting some good effects in the glass cabinet here too. This is an older design, one that we've used in previous releases, sort of version 5, but this has been upgraded just to show how it's advanced with the evolution of the rendering engine. And again, here we've got a lot of lights here, casting a variety of shadows, but these look very, very subtle and nuanced now. Another one that we've had before, again, nice soft shadows. And just to show that there's more to life than just kitchens, we have a bathroom scene here, which has really good effects, great reflections in the mirrored cabinets. And then finally a bedroom scene. This is a daytime scene, but you can still see some lights turned on here, and some great effects here, the reflections in the floor there. Okay. So, as I say, this render took about 5 minutes, but there isn't too much going on in terms of user-added lighting. So this is relying on the external lighting itself, so just the lighting from the sun, using the theme that we have here. The render times will increase, just as even the Presentation and Presentation Plus ones will increase with added user lights. But obviously, if you are going for that high-quality image, then a matter of minutes is still an investment worth making. Okay, I'll just drop down to the lower quality render now. So, just a few other things we want to focus on in terms of sort of the aspects of rendering and presentation. I talked about in the introduction improved perspective view management. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, what we have in Fusion, long-standing functionality, is the ability to generate movies. And movies relied on the ability to save viewpoints. But we saw an opportunity with Viewpoints to give it some life beyond movies. There were basically two, arguably three areas where we could do this. In version 6, we also added our new name views system, where obviously we have different views and different conditions represented by the tabs along the bottom. We also are introducing our 360 Panorama multiple viewpoint functionality. So we saw a role for viewpoints in this context. One of the frailties of viewpoints in older versions was that when you saved a viewpoint, there was no way of knowing exactly what was happening. There was no confirmation to the user that anything had actually happened. So if I just, for example, create another viewpoint here, and we'll just disable layers and lighting on here. So now we're in this particular view. So I'm going to just go for a completely different viewpoint here. So we'll select there. That's fine. So now that'll render, and upon completion, bit of a duff selection, but let's just flip that around here, choose a nicer viewpoint. But basically, what you're now able to do, we've moved the Save Viewpoint up to a higher position in the user interface. And now when you click Save Viewpoint and you happen to have the Navigate palette open, you will now get some actual user interaction here. You'll actually get a visible response. When I hit Save View, what will happen is a little preview of that viewpoint will be added to the Navigate view. And what will happen now is that that viewpoint is stored in Fusion for other uses. So you get a little confirmation of the view that you've had. This is a draft quality preview that's been generated. So now, for example, if I did go to my movie configuration area, then if I go to my Modify Movies, then I have all of the viewpoints that have been defined available down the bottom. That's as it always was. But in addition, we have names added to each viewpoint to give you a better context. In the context of movies, the same principle still applies. You still add items to the movie frames in order to generate that. But again, other functionality. So we improved the visibility in the movie area here. Other functionality that's very interesting is that we often found that in Fusion, when we first introduced the name views functionality, that if you wanted to make a subtle change, if you'd created lots of name view tabs and wanted to create a subtle change between viewpoints. So for example, here I've got my midday sun view here, and here I created a sunset view. Well, in the sunset view, the positioning is not quite identical necessarily quite identical to the viewpoint. So let's say if I just moved that angle slightly to that position there. So now I have a situation where I may have been happy with the viewpoint in my main perspective view here, which is represented by viewpoint 2. And I wanted to apply that same viewpoint to sunset. Well, before version 7, I would have to try and use the mini plan in order to get to an exact point. But because I've saved that other viewpoint, what I can now do is just simply click on viewpoint 2, and it will reapply that viewpoint so that it is entirely consistent with the viewing position for the other one. So, well, maybe it wasn't quite the same one, but let's just prove that again. So we'll save the viewpoint here. There we have a viewpoint 8. If we go to sunset now and apply viewpoint 8, then your view from and view to points will align correctly. So it's a way, if you're making little modest adjustments, having created a series of name views, then obviously you can then get views to align perfectly. There we are, that's much better. So the viewpoints themselves, obviously if you wanted to give them something more meaningful, can be renamed, so you can rename them. And as I say, you can impose a viewpoint on a given name view, or indeed you can do the reverse, which if you have a viewpoint on a name view, you can update an existing save viewpoint to achieve that. So the viewpoint functionality just gives you extra power to your elbow in order to decide what is an attractive series of viewing positions. You can then save those for that design, and then regardless of the lighting conditions or the render conditions, this will not apply any of the contexts of lighting, rendering, or layer selection. It is simply a view from and a view to point. So it allows you to, if you wanted to do this scene as a midday sun, as a sunset, as a night scene, save that viewpoint, and then you can reapply that across those if you change your mind at a later date. The viewpoints come into play also in 360 panoramas, and I'll show you that in a little moment. Okay. Now we talk about our effects functionality. Now, as you will be aware, we introduced in one of the service packs of version 6.3 the ability to apply sort of post-processing effects. So we could do things like reduce the color saturation to get a black and white effect, or we could adjust at things like the color temperature, brightness, contrast, and so on and so forth. So this functionality obviously still continues, but as you can see, we've added some additional interface into the product here, which essentially allows you to save favorite configurations. Some of the feedback that we got from our users was that, yeah, we're loving the effects, but I often find myself undertaking similar things across multiple designs. It would be great to be able to save a configuration and then simply reapply it. So we listened to that feedback, and that's exactly what we've done. So in 7 now, we have this additional area called Favorites, and we have the ability to save a favorite. So clicking on this button, having made some modifications, and now allows you to create a scene. So we'll call this black and white. I'll hit OK, and it will add black and white to our list of options. Now the nice thing about this particular gallery control is that it works very much in a similar way to Microsoft Word, where you have the font styles. In Microsoft Word, where you have the font styles, if you hover over a given font style, then you get a kind of a preview of how things will look. So at the moment, I haven't applied this scene. So the preview, obviously, this is one I created earlier, warmer. So I've really increased the color temperature here. Here's one that's a little more nuanced, so not quite as intense. One where I've really upped on the shadows here. Another black and white one, but a black and white with a lot more contrast, and so on and so forth. I even saved one with the default settings, so I could easily get back to that, although of course you can use the reset. And then finally one that I created called Cooler, to give it a sort of a bluer effect. So just simply hovering over these items gives you a sense of what the post-processing configuration can do for you. And then if that's exactly what you want to do, so do you know what, I like the Cooler one, so I click Cooler, and then it actually applies it to the scene. All your configurations can be reset, and that functionality hasn't changed, and that will now take it back to the default brightness and various other settings that we see before you. But this now allows you to create these. These are saved to your preferences, so it's not even on a per design basis. So this will every new design that you create, anything that you've saved here will be usable across multiple designs. And again, if you wanted to do things like rename them or delete them, then a right-click on any of these options allows you to modify. So if you wanted to adjust the setting, then make those changes in the post-processing section, and hit modify, and that will update that particular one. Rename speaks for itself, and delete also. So yeah, very powerful additional piece of functionality. One other bit of new functionality that we've added comes in and around. It's to complement some of the developments that we've been doing in the 2020 cloud activities. And here on my sunset view, this is just a good one to illustrate this. Very shortly, we will be issuing a 2020 cloud update where a large number of lights will be added to the resource of decorative items, and those lights will have actual true functionality to cast light or display a lit appearance. So in the past, I think when we've added sort of lights or light fittings to the Decorative Catalog, obviously our users have been very resourceful, that they will take a light from Advanced Graphics and maybe turn it upside down and allow it to be sort of represent the fact that light is coming from a particular light fitting. So as I say, very soon we'll be deploying an update to the Decorative Catalog where not only will some new lights be added to the design, things like desk lamps, additional pendant lights, so on and so forth. But those lights will also be, as I say, you'll be able to modify them, turn them on and off. So this is a laboratory example at the moment, but if we were to select that particular pendant light at the moment, you will see that in my items ribbon, we have some activity here in the area here. If this wasn't something that emitted light, this would be ghosted, but we can. turn that light on, and that light will now, as we render, emit a light source. So obviously the usual rules apply, so you can obviously change the color or the intensity of the bulb here. Similarly, items that can generate this appearance. If you're wondering what this thing was in the corner here, it's an aquarium. So if we just select that, and this also has the ability to show light. So we have, for this particular aquarium, there are some lights within the side, and so obviously now, instead of a gloomy pillar, you will be able to see some nicely lit fish swimming around. So this update is due not too far away. We expect it to be probably later this month, if not sooner than that. So, but again, very powerful, and this will be a time-saving device as well. As I say, we all have little shortcuts that we can come up with and devise, which is fantastic. But of course, it's great if the items that we make available to you actually perform the task in the first place. So again, very, very powerful. Right. Remember when we were talking about the viewpoints? Well, now if we move on to the 360 Panorama enhancements, what we've done is we've added another step to the 360 Panorama generation functionality. And the step is here exactly as you see it. Now, see, I mentioned the significance of the viewpoints. So now, in the past, with a panorama, it would have taken you directly to a preview based upon your viewing position. And in previous versions, your viewing position was very, very key. The advice that our support teams would typically give was, well, in a design like this, well, it's very long and it's very thin. Probably the best thing you can do is set yourself in the middle, which might make it a little difficult to see what's at each end. But at least you'll be relatively central, or generate two panoramas, maybe one where you're sort of a third of the way along here, and another one where you're a third of the way along here. But of course that meant sending out two URLs and a lot more extra effort where you didn't necessarily need to. Anyway, the panorama functionality has evolved a little further so that via the single same URL, you can now define and present to your customers different viewpoints. So this dialog here basically lists all of the saved viewpoints that I've created at various stages in the design. So what you should be doing here is thinking, once your design is completed, thinking less now about what's a great central viewpoint to show off the entire design. What you're actually able to do now is what are good points with the design that I want to showcase. And typically that might be, well, I want to show off the the hob area, or the ovens, or the sink area, or an island area, whatever it may be. But of course, the sky's the limit. You can save as many viewpoints as you like. That's fine. And here are all the ones that I've saved so far that can be listed. So obviously from that point of view, you can either choose one, and it would be the same behavior as before, or you can choose multiple. So you could select them all, easily done, just through one button, or we can just choose one, or maybe holding down the control key, I can maybe say, right, well, I'd like to see that end there, and maybe that view here as well. So there's always a default, so it's always viewpoint 1 unless you specify otherwise. So if I select a different viewpoint, then I can click on select viewpoint, and that would become the first point of the panorama when it's generated. So, but I'll go back to that one, set that one as default, and we'll include view 4 and view 7. Okay. So when I hit OK, this is where obviously your judgment comes into play here, because as I've explained, I think in previous webinars, the act of generating a panorama actually does 6 renders per viewpoint. So it will do the top, the bottom, straight ahead, straight behind, and to the left and to the right. So for every extra viewpoint that you choose, you're basically multiplying the render by 6. So obviously, if you have 10 viewpoints, then that's 60 renders that it's going to have to perform here. So I've chosen 3. I'm really putting it through its paces here, particularly on a webinar, but it's progressing relatively well. And then, of course, what we'll expect to see is the preview that you get in Fusion, which allows you to confirm that the viewpoint is correct. But of course, the preview in this case is going to be a little bit different. So we'll let that generation carry on a little bit further, and we'll be able to give you an indication of how that looks. The nice thing about the Panorama is that through the beta testing that we've had from our sort of pilot customers, this was one that has really sort of shone for them as a new feature and function, and to the point where they're thinking about how this might transform the way they present their designs. So here I've done it with my sunset view. There's my aquarium in the distance. So what is different here? Well, what is different here is obviously straight away you can see some targets here. So these targets indicate additional view from points. So I'm in the viewing position that we defined as a default, and I can still move around and spin and have a look and see what's going on in the design. These targets represent sort of fast forwards to other viewpoints. So if I click on viewpoint 4 here, it might take a little time to update over the presentation, so I'll just pause for a while. It then takes you to the new viewing position. And of course, you still have a target here, so that's the viewpoint 1, and if we spin around, eventually we will see one of the other viewpoints. There we go, there's the other viewpoint, which was viewpoint 7, and that will update to the view from point, showing us exactly that viewpoint that we defined. If you find yourself a bit giddy spinning around trying to find the targets, there are other ways of doing it. So we have a little gallery, a little pop-up gallery here. So this is a bit of new interface that you wouldn't have seen in previous panoramas, which simply then allows you to click on the gallery and move from viewpoint to viewpoint in that way. Or if you don't care for that, we have the arrows, which if you remove the panel at the bottom, you can simply use arrows from one side to the other. There's one on the left, one on the right, back again. Or if you want the panel up, you can still use the arrows at the bottom here. So a lot of flexibility here. This is, of course, within Fusion itself. So obviously now if I hit publish, then that would generate the URL as expected. Rather than wait for that to happen, I'll just show an example of one that we already have. This is already available for you to peruse at your leisure on our website. So if you go to the Fusion product page, you'll be able to see a link to panoramas that have been generated not only by us but also by our customers. And so here's such an example. So this is a design. Now this took quite some time to generate because it was done not only at the publish render quality, you can see here with the soft shadows, but also at a high resolution as well. But it's worth the reward. If you're really trying to impress a customer with a high value proposition, then it's worth investing the time in doing that. So again, the same concept. So here we've actually gone as far as naming the viewpoints so that they have some significance. So we've gone from the back door. So now this is a view from the room entrance, so we should expect the view to be from there. And here we are, so that's the room entrance, there we go. And then a view from the dining area. And here we are standing at the dining area, so you have a good view here. So again, it's all about giving your clients an opportunity to view the room quickly and easily from fixed viewpoints as opposed to just a centered viewpoint. And in this design, most likely the center probably would have had you somewhere in the middle of the island configuration, which obviously wouldn't have necessarily been ideal. So again, very powerful. And as I say, a lot of our beta customers who have piloted version 7 have really said that this is making them think quite hard about the way in which they present, and this could open up additional opportunities and avenues for them to do so. Anyway, enjoy it and play with it. I think there's certainly some good fun to be had, and hopefully you'll be able to wow your customers with this new functionality too. So we'll cancel that here. So we focus a lot on the visuals as such, the actual printouts or panoramas and so on and so forth. So now we're going to move back to sort of our plans. So if we go back to a plan view here now, and not only plans but also elevations, and we'll look at some of the enhancements that we've added here. The images that Fusion creates, there's a lot of flexibility here. And in plan view, there's no exception, of course. So when you're in plan, you have the ability to either operate in a scale to fit mode, or you can go in a scaled mode. Now, we mentioned earlier that this design is very long and thin here, and so obviously in a scale to fit mode, it's quite difficult to see those dimensions. You may also recall that in version 6, I believe, we added functionality to make sure that the annotation and dimension values were actually scaling correctly. And what I mean by that is that in older versions than that, the values would remain consistent depending on, regardless of whether you were scaled in or not. We sought to implement functionality so that if you operated in a given scale, and for example, if you zoomed in, it would operate more like an AutoCAD sort of concept, so that the values would scale accordingly, almost like a true architectural design. For some, that was a great innovation. For others, they weren't so sure, and the others that weren't so sure tended to be those that operated in a scale to fit, regardless of the size of the design. So in that case, of course, it became very, very hard to visualize actual physical dimensions, unless you print it out to a very large scale, of course. That was combined with the fact that if you went, for example, to Fusion's options, and we went to our dimensioning section here, Fusion's options obviously gave you a chance to define font settings, which was fine. Defaults out of the box were always 9 and Arial, as I recall. And of course, if you created a design with these, the historical functionality of Fusion was you were stuck with those settings. You could not adjust them. But now in Fusion, obviously you can change your defaults if you wanted anything larger anyway. But now in Fusion, on a per design basis, you now have the ability to review those and change them on a per name view basis. So in this case, my plan view, as we said, was scale to fit. So if I hit my dimensions, I get a little, sorry, I'll just do that more slowly. In our dimensions corner here, we've got a section called dimension options, okay? Now this was an existing area, I think, which gave us a small amount of configuration potential. I think it added the worktop dimension options here and our ability to remove duplicate dimensions. But what we've actually done here is added some additional functionality, which indeed allows you, on a per name view basis in any given design, to change the font settings. So if you were insistent on staying on scale to fit, then of course we can say, right, well, for this particular name view, we could increase the font to font size 14, as an example. And then it increases to something that is a little more reasonable and a little more visible. As I say, this will only do this on this particular name view, but if you looked carefully on that, obviously we had other views available that you could also apply those changes to. So in this case, we had the tiling and the worktop views. That kind of worked very similarly. You might recognize that interface from the work that we did in Annotations in version 6 that allowed you to make changes across multiple views of a similar view type. Obviously, these are only applying to the plan view. If you were making changes in the elevation view, the same concept applies, but it's across multiple elevation views as well. Same thing applies to annotations. So if I go to annotations here, these settings obviously will allow us to increase the size of the annotations. So believe it or not, there is some numerical annotation on each of these units. So if we increase that, let's just say to size 16, then suddenly you can see the numerical annotations appearing on those cabinets. So it's about finding the right balance. I mean, as I say, some people, from our experiences and from what they tell us, some people always operate in scale to fit. Others will use a combination of scale to fit and scaled views. Some people only operate in scaled views. So we've given a solution now that is all things to all people. So hopefully that will make a difference. Moving on, let's look at some annotations now. So what I'm going to do here is just going to add a piece of manual annotation. So I'm going to position my cursor here. We have some new annotation here, and this dialog is very familiar to you, of course. So let's just take some text, so we'll call it example annotation. And one thing that I'll point out to you, I'll come back to it after I've shown this, but what we've done is we've split out the annotation defaults for automatic annotation, such as you see here on the standard units, and for manual annotation. So going into this this dialog, you can actually choose to have a different annotation style for manual annotations to that for standard ones. So for example, you might want all your manual notes to be, because they tend to be messages or instructions, you might want them in bold or italics, and so you can set that as a default. Anyway, in this context, what we've added is the ability to have a variety of additional font settings. So we have our standard set that we have here, but we also have the ability now to customize. So we've got an added set of little dots here, which actually allows you to not only choose from some basic colors, but we have this area elsewhere in Fusion where you can mix a particular color. So it could be if you wanted to go as crazy as saying you wanted all your annotations to match your own sort of corporate color. So maybe your corporate color is a sort of deep sort of purple or navy blue, that sort of thing. So we could click that, add to custom colors, hit OK, and then the color will update to your actual custom color. Of course, all the other customizations that you can make, as I said, this now reflects our defaults that we set for manual annotations here. So we hit OK, we hit OK again, and our annotation now shows in exactly the color that we've defined. In addition, what we've done is, in the past, annotations you could set to some of those predefined colors, but somewhat annoyingly for some customers, the arrow, even though you might have had a different color, would always be a different color, i.e. it would be black. So what we've also done here is that we've updated the functionality here now that the arrow is consistent with that of the color that you've chosen. And of course, if I have a solid fill arrow here, as an example, then so that will also update there as well. So yes, just to recap on our options, if we go back to annotation. So here we have, we've actually split out here. So we used to have a combined preference for both what we're calling them standard items. So this is standard automatic annotation here, and manual annotations. We also have this separate one for items altered by modifiers. So if you use a catalog that employs modifiers and you make modifications to those, then you can to those products, then their annotation can be shown in a different font if you so wished. The key change here in version 7 is the fact that now we can choose different annotation for standard items and manual annotations if you wish to do so. Again, as you know, as a Microsoft partner, we're always trying to sort of keep up to date with the way that they present their ribbon interface. And so we've made one very nuanced change, one sort of major change, which is as follows. The nuanced change is that we have the, just in Microsoft Word or Excel, ribbon display options. So it's an easy click-on item here where you can choose to either auto-hide the ribbon, just show the tabs, or show the tabs and commands such as we have here. So auto-hide obviously means that you have to click in order to make the ribbon appear. Just showing the tabs speaks for itself, so you've just got the tabs, but when you click on one of the tabs, then the ribbon will also appear. But the default is to show all of them. Again, it depends on your own personal preferences. Maybe you have a small screen, you want to make the most of the real estate, then obviously that could be helpful for you. But in Office 2016, I think Windows 10 onward, we have seen in Microsoft that they've evolved from, rather than having little buttons up here to access help, they've moved it to a dedicated help ribbon, and so we have followed suit. So the help ribbon is always available within Fusion, and so we considered what the sort of things that our customers might want help with, and more or less in keeping with the Microsoft standard, but obviously there are things that are very Fusion specific. We designed it as follows. So we have two sections: a reference section, in which obviously the first element is that you get access to the Fusion help. So clicking on the help, as usual, takes you to the online help that we have hosted, and the interface here that you see is more or less the same. I can't remember whether we did this in 6 or 7, but you can now resize this dialog, and it will save the settings that you have. That's very useful. Help tends to be to help you find out where things are, and less about how to overcome particular challenges or planning scenarios or situations. And so what the support team have been working on, and this used to reside in the top corner as well, is the Knowledge Center, so the 2020 Knowledge Center. And this takes you to a website, or specifically a web page on the 2020 website, which allows you to look up answers, perhaps to common problems that the support team have encountered and documented, and go to 2020 Fusion in this case. So this has all been updated to keep pace with the version 7 development. So if you didn't quite pick up on everything I've said about 360 Panorama, as an example, we type in 360, it will give you some options here. So here we are, generating 360 Panorama exports in 2020 Fusion. Then it gives you a little step-by-step process. So here it's referencing the new renders, of course, that you have available. It will then, if I just scroll down, show you the new stage that we've added for selecting the viewpoints. And then it will even go on to tell you some information about the options that you have in the output itself. So all very useful. So if you haven't checked out the Knowledge Center just yet, I would certainly commend it to you. It's continuously being updated by the support team, so there's a very good chance that if it's not the regular support hours and you're toiling away late at night, the Knowledge Center might just give you what you need. The other area that we used to have a link to in the very, very top right-hand corner is the user community. For those that don't know, the user community is an area where you can communicate not only with 2020, but also communicate with other users of the product. So we use it as a means of obviously letting people know of upcoming catalog releases, this webinar here as an example, to double check what the latest version of the application is. Or you as individuals can post comments. Maybe you're having some particular challenges and you want maybe some advice from fellow users, that sort of thing. Again, no subject is off limits, so feel free to take advantage of that. And there's many that do engage with the community, and that could be another way of getting an answer to a problem that you might have. Then we have the About button. Again, in versions past, sometimes it was a little option up here that you had to click on. Sometimes it was a right click on the menu bar. Now nice and easy. Often the first thing a support team member will ask you if you're having a particular problem, which version are you using, sir, madam? Well, now it's easy. You go to Help, and About will generate exactly there. So very, very nice and easy to get that information straight away. Also then, it's a good way of checking to make sure that you are up to date on the latest version. You can cross-refer that with obviously what's being stated on the user community, and then that will give you an opportunity then to check for your downloads to see whether the new version is ready for you. Then we have some links in and around support and training, so a direct link to the support webpage, which will tell you about the various information that's available here. Obviously we've got version 7 now available, so here are, a lot of the information here has been updated in respect of version 7, so all the information is ready for you there. Access to the 2020 Fusion YouTube page, training videos. We're certainly working on getting those up to date. Some are quite old, some are quite contemporary, but certainly just as we've been developing the Knowledge Center, so we have a solid plan to advance on training videos as well. Also then, if you wanted to investigate receiving any online or classroom-based training, there's a link directly to the training page, and again, all of the options that are available here are free to be investigated by yourselves. Incidentally, I think there is a different type of training coming up in the near future, sort of a lighting and rendering sort of masterclass. So it's a dedicated training course, as opposed to the gold, silver, bronze concept that we still operate with. But it's an interesting idea that we think that some customers will really appreciate. That particularly with the advent of version 7, a good chance to take advantage of the new tools and the new skills that you have available. So this is the help ribbon. Like all of the other ribbons, if there's anything that you commonly use, obviously you could still, if you want this accessible all the time, you can still add the options to the quick launch toolbar, so you don't have to go to the help ribbon per se. All of the options are freely available here as well. Just one other little subject area for us to explore in the item list. The item list, obviously we have a series of columns here, which allows us to review an inventory of all of the products and items that are in the design, which is great. However, there were certain aspects of the item list view which were a little clumsy in the past, I guess. So, for example, if you wanted to add elements to the ribbon, additional columns, we used to have something in the item list called a field chooser. And the field chooser was something you then had to click on. It was like a little floating palette, and then from that floating palette you then had to drag the item that you wanted onto the ribbon in order to show the information from that column. And it wasn't the best user interface in the world. Since then, obviously, what we've done, we've looked at sort of how Microsoft typically manage these things, and so we've taken inspiration from Microsoft Outlook here, in which there's no longer now a need to generate the field chooser. What you can actually do is simply click anywhere on the column heading, and wherever you click, to the left of where you click is where it will place a new entry. So, for example, here, I right-click on the column heading, and I can then scroll down any options that aren't already on display. So, for example, if at the end I wanted to show the alerts column, then that will place it there. If I want to get rid of that, then I can just deselect it again. Similarly, again, if I wanted to put something else here, so maybe the quantity, I can put that there. The other way of getting rid of it is just simply to drag it off the column heading. So nice, quick, clean, and easy user interface. Again, this is saved to your preferences. So typically this is the sort of thing that you probably generally only do once, but once you've set it up, you want it to be exactly the way you would like. In addition, we made some changes. Again, the way that prices and value-added tax was presented was in a strange sort of way in the past, where we had an option down here called price, and then you would check it to show either Inc. VAT or Ex VAT, and all we ever had was the ability to show the VAT rate. So now we've recognized that possibly in your columns you actually want to show all of the information, so the price Ex VAT, the VAT rate, the value of the VAT, and whether and the value inclusive of VAT as well. So here, I'm going to do exactly that. So we've got now the VAT value, so I can add that there and resize. Then I could add the price inclusive of VAT, and here we are. So don't worry about these prices. These are just obviously, this is an unpriced catalog here, but you get the idea that we can now have those 4 columns for your particular catalogs. Obviously, they will show true prices and calculate the values appropriately. So that's what I would describe as the pick of the features. That's not necessarily everything, but as usual, I produce what we call our What's New guide, which is full of great information, which I have a copy here. And this is not only available on the product page, but also once you've downloaded 2020 Fusion version 7, there is a link to the What's New guide on your desktop once you've done so. So again, that will detail all of the features and functions that I've described on this call, and a few more. But obviously, we only have so much time to present those. So I hope you enjoy version 7. The plan for deployment is that it is already underway. We started deployment at the beginning of the previous week. As always, much as the same way as with Microsoft and Apple, for example, the deployment is phased, but it's rolling quickly, and so I would expect that all of our supported customers should expect to receive the update within the next few weeks. So some of you, no doubt, may well already have it now, and hopefully you're enjoying it and making the most of it. So obviously, I mentioned before, training, the Knowledge Center and the user community, they're great points of access to get additional information, and now we've made it even easier in version 7 via those links. Of course, we also, if you sign up, you can follow us on the various social media channels for various information, weekly tips and tricks, catalog updates, new manufacturers that we're working with, so on and so forth. And of course, via all of the usual channels, you can find out a lot more. Thank you all for your attention. I hope you enjoyed what you saw, and that as soon as the download becomes available, that you'll be able to start making even more beautiful renders for your customers and working more efficiently and keenly than ever before. So thanks again. Really appreciate your time, and enjoy version 7. Thank you.